It's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Dr. Manly, and we're going to talk about overcoming fears so we can live with joy. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. B'nai Gesserit, Litany Against Fear from the novel Dune. Today, we're going to talk a lot about money mindsets in this episode. I encourage you to listen to the relationships between money and our self-worth. Dr. Manly shares what she sees with others and how they behave with money. Fixing our relationships with money provides us the fuel to live life on our terms. It's something you need to work through and continually keep working through as you get to higher and higher levels. We also talk a little bit about spirituality. Listen in as Dr. Manly talks about a higher power and finding your connection to that. Finding your unique place and the things that make you tick, and then living in that space. At the end of the day, though, fear is what prevents us from living the life of our dreams. Whether it's public speaking, trying something new, or just silly fears, learning to conquer that allows us to live with joy. And isn't that what we all want? It sounds so simple, but like most things, it's hard to actually do. Dr. Carla Marie Manly is a practicing clinical psychologist based in Sonoma County, California, and a recognized authority on fear and fear-based disorders such as trauma, anxiety, and depression. She works with individuals and groups to improve personal growth, relationship connection, and increase life fulfillment. Her personalized approach focuses on utilizing transformational fear in the self-growth and healing process. She combines clinical knowledge with a holistic body, mind, spirit approach, integrating yoga and meditation practices into her therapeutic work and course offerings. Her new book is Joy from Fear: Create the Life of Your Dreams by Making Fear Your Friend. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Dr. Manly. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you for having me, Rocky.
And I'm excited to have you here today. I'm looking forward to chatting a little bit about fear and how we overcome that. Before we do that, let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Great starting question, because it's one we often don't look at, do we, how we learned about money. I was the 9th child in a family of 10, half Russian, half Italian. Both grandparents actually were immigrants. And so for my parents, money was something that you worked very, very hard for. And they instilled that work ethic in us as children. And so even though they ultimately became highly successful financially, we learned, to do our chores, to work hard, to do what needed to be done, to contribute as a group, right? And so I think I had my first job that was paid, being my dad's secretary at age 15. He wanted to break me in, and we learned the value of money. And we also learned the value of education because my dad put himself through college and my mom had a high school education, and they wanted their 10 children to have everything they didn't have, which is just incredibly admirable. And so all of their 10 children had higher education, a family of, doctors, attorneys, nurses, that sort of thing, accountant. Me, I ultimately earned my master's and then my doctorate in clinical psychology. So where does that bring us to in regard to money? It tells me that for my family, what money was useful for was in becoming educated, in having things that were nice, not over the top, but nice, and having a nice cultural background. So those were some of the things that my family really valued. Now, it wasn't all roses in my family, of course. And so there were things that I have found are very important that weren't values within my family or strong values, but indeed the pursuit of money was one of them. And understandably so, because it was something my parents and their parents hadn't had much of. And so when you come from that perspective, realizing how your parents can really allow you to embrace something like money in your own way, right? Is it important to me as a sheer goal, or is it important to me for what I can do with the money that is important to me to be able to share with others? And so that's ultimately the relationship I came to with money. I don't tend to value the pursuit of money in itself very highly, but I do appreciate that money can help me do the things that I like to do, such as help others or get further education or help my children with their education, that sort of thing. And so that's my relationship with money as it stands now. That I like having enough. I don't see the need for me personally to have excess, because I think you can always keep following that little rabbit of money and it doesn't lead you very far if it's just the pursuit of money.
It doesn't. And that's a lesson that I think a lot of people need to learn over time. I noticed you said you had kids. Are you doing something different to teach your kids about money and the relationship?
Beautiful question, and a really provocative one for me, because I always tested smart in school. And so my dad would always say, hey, my nickname was Charlie. Hey, Charlie, you're going to be an attorney. You're going to go to law school and you're going to be a really successful attorney. And I would say, but I think I'm going to be, a psychologist. And no, you're too smart for that, right? And so it was the pursuit of money through law school that I was really being pressed to do. And I did try that route, but became very sick for being out of balance with myself, right? So what I tried to do with my children, and it wasn't until much later after having had a career in the investment world and finding that that was very hollow, right, for me, that I went back to school to earn my doctorate on top of my master's. And that is so answering your question about how do I teach my children, for as long as I can remember, I would tell my little ones the opposite of what I was told. I would tell them, pursue your passion. Whatever your passion is, I'm here to support you. And whatever it is that is your passion, follow it with all your heart. And if money is important to you, the money will come. And so I believe in that. And I would tell them, I don't care if you're a garbage man. I don't care if you're an artist. I don't care if you're a doctor. I don't care if you're an attorney. Whatever it is you want to be, do it, and do it with all your heart so that you're the best at it. I want you to follow your passion. And one of my sons so brightly said, Mom, what do I do if my passion is money? And he was all of 7 years old, right? And he somehow already knew, and that child is indeed following a path that will be very financially lucrative for him. My other son has different priorities. And even though he is living a life that might be less financially lucrative, he tends to have a sense of what his passion is. And so to me, that's what I would really like listeners to be able to honor, is that it's our passion that is most important. Following that passion, knowing that passion, honoring that passion, and realizing that when we don't follow our passion, and I'm a really good case example, when we follow somebody else's passion or vision for us and not the one that we know in our heart is ours, there are some serious consequences.
That there are. And I think for a lot of people, they get stuck on someone else's track, whether it be a parent, a teacher, a friend. Oh, you're good at XYZ, you should go do that. And no one actually thinks through the outcome of that decision. And one day they wake up and they go, how did I get here?
So true, Rocky. So true. We don't realize when we're young and our brains are so impressionable. We just want to be loved and we want to please people. And we don't realize, nor often do the people who are speaking to us. I don't think my father ever meant to hurt me, right? I don't think that their messages were ever intended to send me down a path that would be near deadly for me. I think that oftentimes parents speak their messages coming from a place where they unconsciously are trying to fulfill a dream they weren't able to reach, something that they would want for their child because they weren't able to be the doctor, the lawyer, the whatever. And so I think that's the part where parents, as they're raising their children, it's really important for all of us to say, hey, am I impressing my needs on my child? Am I trying to make my coworker or my mate or my friend do something that is not their passion, but my passion or my unfulfilled dream? And I think that's a really place we often don't realize needs a lot of attention.
That it does. And sometimes I think they just want the best for you and they see that as a safe path, not really thinking of the consequences of the safe path.
Rocky, that's so brilliantly said. If I could count the number of clients I have in my office who followed the safe path, the dad wanted the daughter to be the engineer, and the mom wanted the son to be a doctor because it was something really important to them. And they thought the child would be safe and financially successful and then have a good spouse. And then the child wakes up in the middle of med school or after med school or after having earned all of these incredible degrees and saying, wait a second, I've done this because mom or dad or the teacher suggested it, but this isn't what I want. And they have all of these loans. I have a client who actually did that, went into med school, was near the end of med school, huge student loans, huge debt, and said, I'm not meant to do this. This is not me. I'm fulfilling my parents' dreams, not my dream. And that was really difficult for this client to face, but it was a decision he had to wrestle with and ultimately decided to move in a different way. And the lovely thing is that often our life experiences, including education, aren't wasted. If we use them mindfully, they often come to guide us in another forum.
And that's very true. I mean, we each have our unique journey and our unique path, and we're there to learn the lessons that that path gives us. And we just have to be willing to listen and to think about it and be present to see what it all is.
So true, Rocky. I think I was listening to a book on tape this morning, and it was really just reminding me of some of my own truths, which is that the reason we are on the planet, some people think it's just to be here for fun. Some believe it's to be here to be tortured, right? Other people like myself, I believe that the reason to be on this planet is to constantly learn and evolve and improve myself. And that when we take that attitude, that even our challenges, whether they're financial challenges or, relationship challenges, that they are all there, and we can either blow through them mindlessly and suffer without having a positive outcome, a positive learning lesson, or we can learn to say, wait a second, there's a message here somewhere, there's a growth opportunity somewhere, and then use whatever that is to mindfully create an outcome that leaves us feeling as if we've learned and polished the stone of who we are.
That is very true. You've mentioned, and I've read from your work, that money is not everything. And yet, I think that's a lot of what we are taught, and that's a lot of how we are judged. What are your values around money? What do you think money represents?
There's a lot of lovely research on that money does not buy happiness at all, but it might buy comfort and a sense of happiness up to a certain level, the level where you can pay your bills, have a standard of living that allows you to feed, clothe your children, and tend to life's necessities. And that after that, money does not tend to have a positive impact. And that I would really have to say my life experience, having known and been around people some with enormous amounts of money, some with moderate incomes, and some with very little. It's interesting that the people who have the most money, again, this is my life sample here, tend to be among the least happy, because it's interesting, the more stuff you have, the more stuff you have to own, it tends to own you. And I think a lot of people who have incredible amounts of money confuse money with happiness, and their relationship with money is more about money equals power, money equals control. And I think that that's a very dangerous mindset to have, because then it feeds the idea of dominance and aggression and, getting more of that green stuff at all costs. And for me, that's a very dangerous attitude, and one that I wouldn't want to encourage in my own self, right? But I think when we have a balanced relationship with money that says, I would like to, what I was saying earlier, I would like to have money so that I can have good medical care and have a roof over my head and, travel, see different things, and have enough money to give to other people and share and volunteer. And again, money as fuel for a lifestyle that is balanced. And rather than having money to impress others, money to impress people in the world who, again, if you come back to the idea of love, if somebody really loves me, they're not going to care if I drive a 1965 truck or a, 2021, Murcielago. They're going to love me because I'm me and because I'm happy. And as long as I'm in a car that is safe, they would love me the same. But I think so many times we use money to create an image, and we want people to love us. So we think they'll love us because we have this more beautiful, polished image. And that is, I think that's where sometimes money works against us, because those who really love us and are our friends, I think that they would tend to love us despite the flash, right?
That's very true. If they truly love you.
Right. And I think that that's another area where money can make things more complex, because sometimes I think people who have money have an underlying fear of, does this person like me because of who I am? Or do they like me because of my money and what they think I can do for them? And I've worked with people who have that very real fear. I've had friends who have that very real fear that they are not being loved for who they are, but for the facade. And that's one of the things that I think money can hamper our personal journey in many ways. And I think that that's one of the ways that if we accumulate so much money but don't have a good sense of self underneath, that definitely there are people, no matter how good your sense of self is, there are people who will try and take advantage because somebody has money. But I also think that, again, if we're forming healthy relationships and are really aware of who we have in our world, we would know that the true friends in our world would never misuse us. And so I think it all goes back to, interestingly, it goes back to having a healthy relationship with the self. Because if you have a healthy relationship with the self, then you can do without a lot of money, as long as you have the necessities. And if you have a healthy relationship with the self, then if you have lots and lots of money, then it's just lots and lots of money, right? It's not who you are. It just happens to be something you have at your disposal that you can use with wisdom.
Very true. It's just the fuel to live and make the choices that you want to live. And I think, I've come across 3 words that kind of seem to underlie the concept you're talking about, which is I am enough. And when you are comfortable in your own skin and you feel enough, then you don't have to play all these other games, do you?
Oh, so true, Rocky. And I think that sometimes every human being now and again stumbles upon that inner voice that says, am I enough? And it's natural because often it comes from childhood owies and that never get fully healed, no matter how much we work on them. And so when that voice comes up that says, I'm enough, to realize that this is one of my pet peeves, is that people tend to think when that voice comes up that you can fix it by buying something, by buying a pretty woman to have by your side, by buying a cute guy, meaning however you would accomplish that, not literally buying it, buying the person, of course, by pressing buy now button, for this dress, that fancy car, that we think that a product is going to make us, or a person is going to make us feel better and make us enough. But that's a really dark rabbit hole, because the only person who can make you feel enough is you. And the only substance that can make you feel enough is a good and clean heart and soul. You're not going to find it in money and alcohol and weed or, any substance. That's got to come from you knowing that you are a truly valuable human being. And you can say that all you want, right? But it's only doing the inner work to prove that to yourself in whatever way feels right, so that you know that sentence is true. I am valuable. You have to know that. You have to feel that. And money is not the answer to that.
No, it's not. And I tell people all the time, the biggest obstacle in your life is the reflection in the mirror.
I have a little version of that. I say the biggest obstacle in life, we're saying the same things, different word, is the negative voice inside your head.
And they are one and the same. And I think a lot of people are afraid of and don't talk about that negative voice in their head. And the reality is we all have it, and we need to make peace with it.
You're so right. We all have that voice because we all have a brain, right? And that brain, that mind, let's call it the mind, that mind can definitely get really busy. And some of us, whether it comes from, genetics or life experience, some of us tend to have a kinder voice in the head, a kinder mind that tends to be optimistic and cheerful and positive. And I'm a natural born optimist, but, of course, even then I can still have little negative voices come in. And then you have other people way on the other end of the pole who seem to have nothing but highly critical brains that are judging others or judging the self. And that really breeds this toxic environment for the self. And so when that kind of person looks in the mirror there, or maybe looks at other people on the street, there's a great deal of judgment of others and judgment of the self going on. And so I think that's something that even if we're not natural born optimists, that is something that we can all strive for, is noticing when that negative voice is at work and retraining it. And I think we have so much power in that. And we were talking earlier about my book, Joy from Fear, and is one of the big pieces I cover in my book about how important it is in order to create a balanced lifestyle, a balanced self, to start with the self and realize what your narrative is. Is it a negative, highly critical narrative? Is it a generally positive narrative? And really working from that place to notice how you talk to yourself day in and day out. And then do the work to shift it. Because if you're not thinking in a constructive way, then you're thinking in a destructive way, and that makes your days darker and gloomier. And no wonder we have such high levels of anxiety and stress and depression in our society, because people are living, many people, in this place of negativity.
And that's a choice that we make. It's ours and ours alone. You mentioned about living holistically and in balance. What does that mean, and what are the components we need to focus on?
Such a good question, Rocky. And I think that for everyone, living holistically, some people shy away from that idea and say, oh, that's, hippie. And I look at it as not being too bohemian or too hippie, but I look at it as living holistically, as in looking at your body, your mind, and your spirit, checking in with yourself, because that's really who you are. You are not just a body, you are not just a brain, and you are not just a spirit. You are all three of those pieces. And we tend to often highlight one or two of those places in our lives. And some people are very much body oriented, right? And they really live in their body, their sense of pleasure, their sense of, being in, doing what the body wants, right? And that's important because the body is our home. And then some people live very much in the mind, following mind-based pursuits, let's get ahead in life, let's do this, let's think that, right? And some people, not too many, but live in a really spiritual frame where spirituality is their focus in life, right? And it's all about the spirit. And I think because we are physical beings who have bodies, minds, and spirits, that the ideal way for people to create balance is to look at all three of those components day in and day out, touch them, acknowledge them, and bring them into slowly but surely greater harmony in the way that feels right to you. And the way that feels right to Rocky may be different than the way that feels right to me. But I think that when we really turn our attention to those three components, because we often use the lingo, a body, mind, spirit approach, or, she's a body, mind, spirit lady, but we don't know what that means. And so breaking it down in my life, and I can speak to my life so that listeners know a little bit more about me, is my body. I really look at it as being my home. It's the place that I live in. It lets me walk through life and breathe, and it's my home while I'm on this planet. So I want to take care of it. I want to give it water. I want to give it good food. I want to give it good sleep, right? And so paying attention to that part of me, the body, knowing it's interesting because at come 10 o'clock at night, I'm exhausted, right? I'm up early and my body wants sleep. And if I don't give it its sleep, then it doesn't function as well the next day, right? And so I know the value of sleep, and I know the value of sleep for everyone. We all have this 7 to 8 hour frame of sleep that we need every night. Some people, of course, there are very few of them out there who really only need a few hours. But for most of us, nearly all of us, we're 7 to 8 hour people as adults. Children need more. Adolescents need a great deal. So knowing that I need to care for my body, to give it good rest, good sleep, good food, good timeouts, good medical checkups, good medical care. So that's the body part, bringing that body part into balance, making sure my body gets exercise, right? And then that leads us into the second part. That's the body. Well, the mind. How is the mind affected by all of this? Well, the mind is affected when we bring it into balance. And now that I've taken care of the body, now it's how is that affecting my mind? Well, when I get better sleep, my mind will work more fluidly, right? My mind will be clearer and more focused. And research shows us that if we have several nights of interrupted sleep in a row, that can be as bad on the body and the mind as having had no sleep for a couple nights in a row. That is how important the sleep is for us when it comes to our mental world. And so the mind, bringing the mind into focus and balancing that, knowing, as we talked earlier, that it's our thoughts that create our world. So if we're having negative, critical thoughts, we are going to create a negative world for ourselves. If we have positive, uplifting thoughts, we're going to create that as our reality. So really looking at that part in life of how do I tend to my mind and how do I tend to the emotions that are part of body and mind and giving emotions. And that's where a lot of people don't pause, Rocky. They compartmentalize their emotions and they don't feel. So I'm right in between the body and the mind here because our emotions stem from the body, right? Then they're filtered through the mind and then create our feelings. And so when we're not in balance with our emotional world, we either run from our emotions, we compartmentalize them, or we let them overtake us. And none of those tend to be very healthy. And a lot of those, when that's out of balance, a lot of people reach for substances, whether or excess in some way, as a way to mask the feelings or not deal with the feelings and the emotions. So again, bringing the emotional world into focus, creating balance there. And then the third piece, of course, now let's move to spirituality, what do we do with the realm of spirituality? And some people say, I'm not spiritual. I'm not religious. I don't believe in God. And I say, well, you believe in something, something that's beyond yourself. And I lead meditation once a week at a drug and alcohol rehab center. And the way I approach that with these women is that they can choose their higher power, no matter what their higher power is. We all have one. It might be God, Buddha, Allah, Yahweh. It might be the power of nature, the power of love, the power of family, the power of friendship, the power of science. Right? Something lets you know that you are not the only creature on this planet and that there's something bigger and more connective in nature than just your soul being. And so when we get to that space, we realize, okay, so I am somewhat spiritual. And getting to know your own unique spirituality and what makes you tick, what makes you feel more connected in that realm. And then breathing into that so that you can feel connected. Because one of the biggest issues we have in our society today is this epidemic of loneliness, where people feel very disenfranchised, they feel very lonely, they feel very scared, but they don't want anyone to know. They want to be tough and strong about it. And so if we can slow it down and realize that some of that is the space of spirituality, because spirituality, I believe, wants us, one of its basic messages is that we all need to be connected, because we are gregarious creatures. And when we aren't connected to others, then we tend to suffer, and we often suffer in silence. So I look at those three components, the body, mind, and spirit, and creating balance within them as an ongoing process in life, and something that we need to focus on. We need to slow down and pay attention to it. And interestingly, that if we go back to the pursuit of money, if we're only pursuing money, then all of that gets out of whack. It's no longer balanced, because we're putting all of our energy into this one mental pursuit. And it does take physicality to get there, of course, but this one pursuit of the god of money, and then we get absolutely out of balance.
That is very true. And I think talking about these emotions and these feelings are something that we should focus on. We'll be back with Dr. Manly in a moment. What are your money scripts? What's your focus in life, and is it in harmony? Whether it's business or personal, and they both go together, how are you creating the song for your life? Do you have the right relationships with money? Do you use it to live abundantly? I can't help with some of these issues, but we have many guests who can, including Dr. Manly. When you've solved them and you have clarity and you're ready to go to the next level to do amazing, that's the time to call me. That's when we create the life of your dreams, the business that gives you the freedom. It's incredible. So what are you waiting for? What's taking you so long? Is it fear that's holding you back? There's nothing to be fearful from when you have a chat with me. It's pretty calm, and most people take massive action. If you want to reach out, it's rocky@richersoul.com. Now, let's get back to the amazing conversation with Dr. Manly and getting over fear. I know you wrote the book, which and it kind of focuses on these feelings. It's Joy from Fear. And I always like to ask, why did you write the book?
Rocky, I wrote the book because when I got out of the business world of finances, of investments, I realized, and one of the reasons I got out of that world was that I realized I was dying. I was choking myself, and that I was being a terrible role model for my children. I was teaching them exactly the opposite of what I had always preached. I had always preached, follow your passion. And they're seeing their mother doing something that was lucrative in some ways, but not at all feeding my soul. And so I had this epiphany that I needed to follow my passion. And so I got out into the world. I lost my marriage over it because my husband preferred me to stay where I was. And so I lost my marriage, a lot of challenges and life shifts. Yet as I went into my doctoral program, and again, I had my master's earlier on in life, so I had that to build on. But the overhaul of my life was so challenging and so transformative in ways that I could never have imagined. I mean, it was incredible. And so I gave my children the gift of seeing what it looked like to find your wings, to have the courage to find your wings and to fly. And so that was one of the biggest benefits. But then as I went through doctoral school, I paused to say to myself, what took me so long? In fact, I had a dream where one of my sisters who had passed away from Marfan syndrome, she came to me and she said, what took you so long? And I think that, now that I'm talking to you, I realized that was probably a big thing for me. And so I started asking myself that question. What took me so long? I realized that this tough, powerful, strong, courageous woman, Carla Marie, was not that tough and powerful and strong. That in fact, she was very scared for a very big part of her life and had done what other people needed to have done so that she didn't muddy the waters or make other people uncomfortable or not live somebody else's dreams. So as I was in doctoral school, I started researching fear. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to pull it apart. I wanted to dismantle it. I wanted to be able to find a message that would help other people never get stuck the way I had been stuck. I wanted more for other people. And so I created qualitative and quantitative research instruments, used hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these surveys to better understand fear. I deconstructed fear into rational fear, which is fear of getting, bit by a snarling dog. And then this other part of fear that is largely irrational. And then I broke the irrational fear down into constructive fear, destructive fear, and transformational fear. And what I found was that, let me explain those terms really quickly, that destructive fear is the fear that tells you you're not good enough, or the fear that tells you you will not be loved, you will not be accepted, you will be thrown out. Right? Something like that. Those are all destructive fear at work. And destructive fear is tricky because it likes keeping us stuck. It likes it. It wants us to stay stuck. Next step, constructive fear. Constructive fear is the truth. Constructive fear is wisdom. Constructive fear is the one that turns and says, really? So you think that you're not good enough? Well, let me remind you of how wonderful you are, of how strong you are, how resilient you are, and that you have the power to change any aspect of your life that you want to change. That's constructive fear. So many people can move away from destructive fear and into constructive fear if they're taught how to do it, but now things get really scary. Now it's time for transformational fear. And this is when we're on the precipice of the cavern, right? We're right there. And we go, God, if I do this, I'm going to rock my world. Everything's going to change. I might lose this, I might lose that, but you know what? My life is worth it. I will gain, right? And so then in transformational fear, we do what must need done. We do what must be done in order to create the lives of our dreams. And so in that process, that 3-step awareness of the destructive fear, constructive fear, and then the transformational fear, that's where change, big and little change, can occur. And so I realized that in my research, and realized that the people who have the greatest life fulfillment are those who use that process on some level. And the ones who are unaware of that process, unaware of the importance of moving through fear, of embracing fear, that those people tend to close down, constrict, and live in a very fearful way. They might not appear fearful, but they will live in a closed off, constricted way, whether they are afraid of communication with their wife, whether they are afraid of moving on to a better job, whether they are afraid of losing the toxic boyfriend, whatever it is. And so I put all of my energy and my passion from that research into the book, Joy from Fear. And then I wanted to do something better. I wanted to make it so that a listener, a reader, because it's also available on Audible, could do self-work in the book, so that as they use the book for greater self-awareness, even if they couldn't afford psychotherapy, or perhaps they're afraid of going to therapy, or perhaps they prefer to work in a women's group or a men's group as opposed to, one-on-one with a therapist, or, singular, bibliotherapy with themselves, that they could find a way to use the book joy from fear to create the life that they deserve. And so that's the story of joy from fear.
Thank you for sharing. And so I've heard you say that the joy is in the journey. If you're not having fun now, that's an issue. So how do we increase our joy in this moment?
Such a good question, Rocky. I think that so much of the time when we are not in a place of joy, it is because we're tormenting ourselves. And most of us wouldn't necessarily think that we like to torment ourselves, but for some reason we do, right? And two of the ways that we really torment ourselves are by worrying. Because worrying, we're thinking about something in the future. How can I control this? How will I worry for you? I'm worried about that. And worry breeds anxiety. And so if we can just stay in the moment and I'm not saying to be blasé about the future and not plan for the future. I'm just saying don't worry about it, right? That do the work that you need to do, the planning you need to do, and then trust that your best efforts will be rewarded in some way in the future because you're doing your best. You might not be able to see it at the moment, but trust that you'll move forward, right? So I think that learning that worry and anxiety are not at all helpful in any way, right? So I think that that's one of the important things to finding joy is letting go of anxiety and worry. I think the other really important part for joy is to let go of the voices of comparison and resentment and criticism, those negative voices. And the reason that those can prevent our joy is those all come from destructive fear. So if we're being critical to others or to the self, clearly it's going to lower our joy factor. It doesn't feel good to be criticized. So there's one. If we are in a place of resentment where we're not forgiving somebody, we hold that within the self. And then that becomes a really a very toxic filter, right? Because we're resenting, we're being really destructive to the self and to others when we resent. And sometimes people will say to me, well, if I forgive someone, that means I'm allowing them to hurt me again. And no. It simply means that you forgive them so you get the negative energy out of your body. And then also have strong boundaries that say, okay, you can't come into my world and do this again. I'll let you possibly into my world once you show me that you're not going to harm me again. And so I think that those elements, as well as, really looking to the past and saying I should have or I could have, or blame, those kind of elements, I think those all take away from our joy. Again, they come from destructive fear. There's no purpose to them. So when we hear that toxic voice again of criticism, resentment, lack of forgiveness, negativity, judgment, all of those places, if we can learn to let go of them, notice when they're present, not judging the self or others, just notice when they come up and then flushing them out, just letting them go as if they're clouds in the sky. I think that when we do that, working with the negative and then working with the anxious and the worry, when we become more aware of those and flush them out, just release them when they come up, we tend to just naturally let joy come in because joy is who we are. And it just gets clouded over by the murkiness of those other elements. And I really believe that when we are in our space of joy, much like a newborn babe is when it's in its mama's arms, right? It's joyful. It's content. It hasn't been tarnished yet by all of the negative socialization, right, that brings the fear and the torment. So I think that is how we find our joy, is constantly going back to flushing out the negativity, flushing out the anxiety and the worry. And the more we do that with conscious awareness, the more we create space for the joy that's always there, just waiting.
And that takes time to do the inner work, and it takes constantly showing up. I think, though, especially with anxiety, a lot of people probably turn to medication. Does it help?
Oh, Rocky, you keep asking me such profoundly wonderful questions. You're right. Yes, you're right that working on the self takes work. It takes work. And I get amazed constantly that people say, I don't have time for self-work. And I think, wow, you spend hours, and again, not judging, but just calling to their attention. Wow, you'll spend hours exercising or hours shopping or hours doing all of this external stuff. But the most important part of your being, your power center, your well-being center, you don't want to spend a half hour on that beautiful creature every day. And so just calling it does take work, it does take focus, it does take commitment. And so that's so important. And then when you go back to the place of doing that work and making time for that work, when we make that commitment to self-work, just as we would commitment to maintaining a car or feeding ourselves, and realizing that's part of the natural rhythm and that's part of our natural essence, then it becomes more of a privilege, right? A privilege to make time for reflection and a privilege to make time to notice. Now, getting to your point on anxiety, a privilege to make time to notice that we are anxious, that we are stressed, that we are feeling depressed. And so can anxiety meds be helpful? Can antidepressants be helpful? Absolutely. I am not a fan at all of using psychopharmaceuticals without addressing the underlying issues. Because when we don't address the underlying issues, then we're just putting a Band-Aid over a festering wound. And while insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies might very much like you to go that route, it's actually not effective for the self in the long run. So there are some people who have such overwhelming anxiety or depression that in order to get out of bed and function and even feel like they could engage in psychotherapy, they can't do it. They can't do it because they're too low or too anxious. So of course, there are times where we need psychopharmaceuticals in order to create a level that allows a person to begin to function and embrace psychotherapy, to find out what's going on underneath that's causing the depression, that's causing the anxiety. And I discuss this at length in my book, Joy from Fear, because it's so important. And here's the really important piece as well on this topic, that some people who take medications feel like they are defective, that they are bad, that they shouldn't need this medication. And I say, be kind to yourself. As long as you're trying to do some psychotherapy at the same time, you just might need the medication. Be kind to yourself. Be kind, not judgmental. Then some people will find, this is another piece, that certain psychopharmaceuticals don't work for them. And so then they feel even more defective because the medication didn't work. When in truth, psychopharmaceuticals are often target practice. They're just administered by a doctor who's busy doing a million other things and says, hey, try this. And the interesting piece is that now with the advent of pharmacogenomics, they're realizing that they can tailor make, if they would slow down and do this with every client, it would be amazing. They can find medications that would be right for this person, that would actually address your particular needs rather than just, throwing a dart at you and hoping that it works, or not even caring if it works, just knowing you're going to feel better that I've thrown something at you. So that's my thought on medication. I do think that I really have to emphasize, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you're stressed, find someone who will help you work on the underlying issues. And so many times the underlying issues stem from negative situations in childhood. They stem from traumatic life experiences. And some people will say, I hear this so often, oh, it happened to me when I was just a kid. How can it affect me now? And I say it because your brain retains the memories. Your body retains the memories. And the reason you still have those memories of your, father, chasing you with the hammer is because it terrified you. And we hold on to that, which causes us terror, and it stays embedded in the psyche until we release it. It's not about blaming mom or blaming dad. There's no use in blaming anyone, but there is a great deal of use in going back and understanding what our owies are and giving them attention in the here and now so that they can be healed.
I kind of shocked to learn how much childhood memories and how much things that occur in childhood affect us as adults, whether it be fear or money scripts or anything else. We kind of have to go back to our childhood selves and fix the original issue that occurred.
So true, Rocky. So true. And again, I really encourage people to realize it's not about going back and hating mom or hating dad or blaming them. It's about going back and saying, as you said, what was the childhood script? Noticing the script, noticing how it's created a destructive fear in the mind, right? And then going into a place of how can I move out of that? And sometimes we, don't even realize sometimes it's not mom and dad who did it. Sometimes it's like a first love relationship where, I was working with a man who remembers that his first love relationship betrayed him. She betrayed him and he was 16 and she betrayed him and went out with someone else behind his back. And he was just head over heels over her. And on some level, at that point in time, he decided, I'm never going to trust a woman again. He wasn't conscious of this, right? Yet here, he's now in his 30s and is just realizing how much that first love relationship of being betrayed had affected his next 20 years were governed by that memory. And then sometimes for people, hey, I can say it for myself as well. My first marriage, significant early betrayal by my husband. Had no idea. And it was significant, Rocky. It was huge and multi-layered. Had no idea how, I think I was 23 or 24. I had no idea because I believed I was strong and loving and giving and compassionate and I could get over anything, right? And didn't realize until many years later how that betrayal had created other betrayals from him and my allowing them. I didn't realize I was allowing them, but that was my part in it. I stayed. And that essentially traumatized me on a very deep level that made it difficult to trust in the future. And then doing the self-work that we can all do to go back and look at those relationships, whether they're parent-child, whether it's a relationship with an early mentor, a boss, a coach, a teacher, a first love, a third love, whatever it is, and being able to go back and look at those relationships. Again, not hating the person who might have betrayed us or hurt us. There's no good in hating somebody, but there is a lot of good in going back and listening to the messages that we gave ourselves or the way that we contributed to that dynamic. And sometimes we contribute to a dynamic simply because we tolerate it. And by tolerating it, we're complicit. And so we sometimes don't think about it that way. And then going back and saying, what can I do we can't go back and redo these life relationships with parents or, other formative relationships, but we can go back and look at them and say, okay, what will I do differently in the future? How am I going to use that lesson to be a stronger, wiser, more powerful me? And so that's the way I like to look at past. Is a lot of people, Rocky, get stuck in the past, and that's where depression often comes from. They get stuck in the past, stuck in the messages of destructive fear that want you to stay in the past. Destructive fear wants you to stay in the past, and that can be such a depressing place to stay. We don't want to stay in the past, even if it's positive, right? We're forward-moving creatures. And so if we can learn to look at the past with a kind, empathic soul, really learning-oriented soul, we can learn so much and become so free and so filled with joy and so filled with personal power. And that's what the world needs more of. The world doesn't need more people stuck in anger, hatred, or depression. The world needs more people who are powerfully alive, supportive, kind, constructive, living their dreams. There you have it.
And that's what this is all about, living your dream. It's your choice, right? You get to choose. And if you're not living your dream, the only person to blame is where we started at the beginning, yourself. And you've got to overcome your fears and start taking reasonable, small steps forward to build the life that you want to lead. And it should be joyful. And the only person who's going to make it joyful is you. So figure it out and take the steps to get into that place. Is there anything else you wanted to share on the subject of living a joyful, more meaningful life, but didn't get a chance to?
I guess, Rocky, just to wrap it up, is for listeners to realize how important it is to be compassionate with yourself. You didn't know what you didn't know, right? I look at my past and I have so much compassion for myself. Not that it's not, I also want to be responsible about my past and my future, but also to really be compassionate and say, hey, sweetheart, you didn't know what you didn't know. You didn't know, but now you know. And now that you know, let's not repeat it. And so when you come from that place of, hey, no one gave me a guidebook, no one gave me a copy of Joy from Fear when I was 16 and said, hey, honey, read through it. Let's keep working on it, right? No one gave me a guidebook. Most people aren't given guidebooks, right? Sometimes we're given the Bible, but even that's written a little bit in code that's hard to figure out sometimes. I want listeners to know, hey, be compassionate with yourself. Don't blame yourself. Don't blame other people. Just look and say, okay, I have this life. It's not happy. It's not happy in these particular areas. I'm going to figure it out. I have the power. And then reach out, whether you get a copy of Joy from Fear, whether you go see a psychotherapist, whether you join a group that can support you. You have friends out there. You have people who will support you. And if you don't, go find friends out there. Go find people who will support you, because there are other people just like you suffering in silence. Know that you can change your life. Know that you can create the life of your dreams. You might need a nudge and might need some support. Hey, I've had support on my journey, and we all need support in some way.
And so based on our conversation, what's one action step people can take this week to move forward?
Beautiful question. Find something in every day that gives you joy, no matter how small it is. It might be singing a song. It might be drinking a cup of tea. It might be going for a walk to the mailbox. Whatever it is that gives you joy, notice at least one thing every day and then do more of it. That's what I would leave you with. Grow your joy, water it.
And I think that's an excellent action step for this week.
Yay!
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living a joyful life?
My secret to living a joyful life is waking up every day, no matter if it's gray or rainy or sunny. Wake up every day in absolute gratitude. Stretch, greet the day, start singing a cheerful song, and it starts my day in a really positive way. That's my secret.
That's an excellent secret. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
To stand in my truth, Rocky. To stand in my truth, to not let myself be bullied by anyone. That would be, if I could learn something sooner, that would be it.
And what's one piece of advice you would give your younger self?
My younger self? Oh, that's such a good question. What's a piece of advice I'd give my younger self? I would tell her that all of those things that you dream of being and doing, they are all possible. Do them. Follow them. No matter what anybody says, those are your lights. You beautiful, beautiful child. You go and you live your dreams. Breathe passion into them. Live them. You can do it. That's what you're meant to do. Go be you.
It's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, but if we don't do it, we eventually come back to it anyway, don't we?
We do.
It ends up whether we're on our deathbed or midlife crisis, it's there, that specter of what we could have been, what we could have done, right? So, hey, whenever you see that ghost come up, do it now. Do it now. Don't be listening to it on your deathbed.
Not fun to have regrets on the deathbed.
I haven't been there yet, but I don't think it would be.
Where can people find you and connect and learn more?
You can find me at my website, drcarlamanly.com. Carla is spelled with a C. Manly is Manly. And my website takes you to my YouTube site where you can meditate with me, do a little bit of yoga, and also my Facebook page, which is also Dr. Carla Manly. You can also see on my website a link to my book, Joy from Fear, which is available at your local bookstore. It's available at Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. If you email me, you can email me through my website. I always try and be very responsive to email questions. And also, my website has a wealth of free information, articles I've generated, as well as resources. So please, please feel free to use my website as a resource.
And I will put links to all of those in the show notes, so it'll make it easy for people to find you.
All right, then.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Rocky. It was such a joyful and thought-provoking conversation. We went really deep, so I thank you for that.
You're welcome. We always like to do that here.
You succeeded.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Fear holds us back. We all experience it, including me, and we need to figure out how to overcome it. The first step is acknowledging that that's what's holding us back. The second is finding the right person who can help you walk through the fear to help you overcome it. This week's action step, find something that gives you joy and do it. It doesn't matter how small it is. Go enjoy it. I try and spend every morning enjoying the beauty of nature outside my back door. It starts my day with joy. What about you? We all have the possibility to make choices. And the biggest thing is to not let someone else set your path. And too often in life, that's what happens. We've had many guests who were sent down a path that wasn't the one they wanted to do, and they had to make major course corrections later in life. To learn more about Dr. Manly, check out many of the links in the show notes to see what she has to offer, including her new book. If you're still listening, you must have liked the episode, so please share it with a few friends. And if you get a chance, leave a review. I would appreciate that. You can also connect with me on Facebook. There's a Facebook page and a Facebook group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action and living in fear creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me. We can start with a short, no-obligation chat to see if we're a good fit for coaching. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward towards their dreams. You can reach me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I've shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.